This is the brand new iPhone 17 Pro. I'm going to take you through a typical day in life with the phone. So we're going to be testing everything from the battery life to the video and photo capabilities, all the way down to the software, and giving you an idea of what it's like to use the phone on a daily basis, or even if it's worth upgrading from something like the 16 Pro. Right now it is 8:34 in the morning and my battery's at 100%, so let's go ahead and get started. So first, let's talk about the cameras on this thing. As far as I'm concerned, iPhone cameras are always really great, but this year, all of the rear lenses are going to be featuring a 48 megapixel sensor, which is great because now you don't sacrifice image quality no matter which lens you're shooting with. I'll throw up some examples here now just so you can see, but the details in the dark parts of the photos compared to the light ones, it's really incredible, especially from such a small sensor. So really not much has changed with the displays on the new phone. You're still gonna get that same ProMotion up to 120 Hertz with that variable refresh rate, so super smooth display, super smooth scrolling, everything feels really snappy and responsive. You're also still gonna get that 6.3-inch Super Retina XDR display, so everything's gonna look really crisp. The only real difference in the display this year, at least on the Pro phones, is that you now get up to 3000 nits of peak brightness. Now that extra brightness is definitely a welcome improvement, but really there's just not too much different with the new displays this year. That being said, it's not necessarily a bad thing, especially given that the display was already really good. And I think a lot of people, even professionals, are probably not going to be doing much more than 120 Hertz, unless of course you're doing things like gaming, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But now let's go and talk about something that actually has changed, which is the design. So a lot like my clothes, the design has actually changed quite a bit. And it's kind of crazy because despite all of these really big changes, the phone still kind of sort of looks the same. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. Let me explain. Now, the most obvious change is going to be this new cosmic orange color. Now, usually for my phones, I prefer like a black or a silver, like a more like muted color. But this year I decided, you know what, why not try something a little bit different? That's definitely one of the biggest differences between this phone and the older one, the 16 Pro. But another big difference is actually the way that the phone is designed. New for this year, you have a full-on aluminum unibody construction. So that means that everything on this phone is, aside from the glass part, just one body. So it's a lot more durable, in theory, durable. But some people, especially if you go to an Apple store, you'll notice that a lot of these phones, especially the ones with color, are scratching very easily. Now, it's mainly just on the corners of the phone. Luckily, I haven't really experienced that problem yet, but it is still something to be aware of, especially if you're going for a colorful phone like the blue or the orange that I have here. The other big difference is what Apple is calling the camera plateau. Now you can see that the camera housing is a lot different. So everything is going to be inside here for the camera, whereas on here, you just have the single camera layout right there. But the design changes don't just go outside the phone, they've also changed the inside of the phone as well. So battery life on the phone is also a really great improvement, which huge thumbs up. Right now it's currently 11:30, and as you can see, my phone is at 76%. And mind you, this is with me like shooting some video, taking some photos, shooting in log, like pretty relatively intense things. And my 16 Pro, which granted was not charged 100%, so it's not a fair test, right now it's at 69%. Nice. Another new design is going to be the brand new vapor chamber. Now, a lot of other phones have had this for a little while now, but this is the first time we're seeing this on an iPhone. So what the vapor chamber does is it basically takes a lot of the heat from the phone and it dissipates it through, well, vapor. And so that means that you can push the phone harder for longer. Now, in everyday use cases, you're probably not going to notice it too much unless you're doing something like gaming maybe, but when it comes to shooting video, if you're doing any sort of 3D rendering or animation on your phone, basically a lot of those intense workflows are going to be handled a lot better by that new technology. You've also got the millimeter wave antenna up at the top, which is going to give you improved 5G service, which is something that I've actually noticed with this phone. Like in areas before where I was getting decent service, now I'm getting like 5 bars there. So I think that's definitely helped a lot. But speaking of new technology, let's actually go back to the cameras and talk about some of the photo capabilities of this phone. Left out of Best Buy, and I unfortunately had to empty my bank account and get a new laptop. I'm probably not gonna actually like keep this thing forever because the laptop that I have right now, it's still a MacBook. It's the MacBook Pro, the M1 Pro, but the problem is that the battery is like basically failing because I leave it plugged in all the time. And so I went to the Apple store yesterday to actually try and get it replaced. And of course they can do it, but they'd have to send it out. So I'd be without my laptop for up to a week. And so because I have a trip coming up, instead of actually sending it out, what I decided to do instead is I'll just buy this laptop for right now. And then I'm gonna try to see if I can make an appointment at the Apple store tomorrow. That way I can just have it sent out and then it'll get repaired while I'm on the trip. And then when I come back, I can just go ahead and basically return this one and then keep the other one, my old one. Because there's nothing wrong with it other than the battery. Like, it's perfectly fine for what I need it for. But it's just that turnaround time is pretty rough. So let's talk about the camera quality, specifically the photos on the new 17 Pro. So as I mentioned earlier, all of the rear cameras are going to be using 48 megapixels for their sensors. And so you can see just the difference in quality that makes, especially when you're using like the 0.5 or even like the new 4x zoom. So these pictures here that I took, for example, this first one here is with the 0.5, the typical wide angle camera. And then this is the new 8x zoom. So this is basically equivalent to like a 200 millimeter. So you can get some really interesting pictures with this too. You can of course still shoot in RAW format, so you're not going to lose any quality in that aspect if you're looking for more professional, like video editing kind of setup. And I feel like every year, for whatever reason, like with the new cameras, even though like not too much actually changes, for some reason the photos just look better, if that makes sense. And yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that they did take away the 5x zoom, but even now, I think the digital cropping is a lot better than it was even on the 16 Pro. I'll throw up a few more pictures here that I took with it just so you can kind of get an idea of the capabilities that this thing has. I mean, this is like almost like a professional camera just in your pocket. I mean, of course, it's not going to compare to anything like an actual professional camera. Like, I'm still always going to prefer my A6700 over actually, you know, just using my iPhone. Because at the end of the day, the bigger the sensor, the more light you let in, the better the picture quality is going to be. And the sensor that you can fit inside of a phone or just anything this small is really only going to be so big. But I think it's still really, really impressive that you can get this kind of quality, like literally just in your pocket. Of course, you do still have the camera control button, which, I mean, I don't use it when I'm taking pictures, but I actually use it quite a lot as just like kind of a quick release button for my camera, if that makes sense. Like, it's so much easier to take the phone out of my pocket and just press the camera control button to be able to shoot something, as opposed to even just having the camera button on my home screen. And so I feel like the camera control button gets a lot of unnecessary hate. Like, it's pretty cool. Like, granted, I don't really use it like to take the photos, but still, it's pretty cool. And I think there really is something to be said about the fact that you can get so many different camera lenses basically with just these 3 lenses here on your phone. I mean, like, you've got everything all the way from like basically like a 16 millimeter all the way to a 200 millimeter lens with just this phone in your pocket. Like, I think it's still pretty impressive. What's also impressive is the performance of the phone. So let's go ahead and talk about that too. So right now it's 124 and my phone is currently at 57%. And even though I know that I shouldn't have it, I still have like battery anxiety. Like, part of me wants to reach for a charger because I'm still like low-key traumatized from my iPhone 12 that would die in like an hour. But it's actually really impressive that this thing, even when like filming videos and stuff like that, it can still like hold up with the battery. So I think that's a huge testament to, one, obviously a bigger battery, but also just Apple being able to be more efficient too with their software and how it uses the battery. So good job on that aspect too. So when it comes to the actual performance of the phone, I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about like all of the different benchmarks and stuff like that and Geekbench scores and things like that, like, because that's not actually practical when it comes to real world uses. The biggest things that you need to know: this phone now has the A19 Pro, so this is the next generation of Apple's iPhone processors. The other big thing is that this phone now has 12 gigabytes of RAM. So if you're someone like me who doesn't really ever close out like any of your apps, you're gonna really enjoy that, because all that RAM means that you can keep going for longer. The other thing that you'll notice, but that you might not actually notice, is gonna be the vapor chamber. So with that, what you should see is that your phone will get hot a lot less often, and when it does, it doesn't get as hot. So these are all like real world things that you can actually benefit from, not just like numbers on a benchmark. And if you're coming from something like this, the 16 Pro, you'll definitely appreciate that, because I don't know about you, but my phone, it would always overheat even if I'm just doing regular things. Part of that is down to the fact that this has a titanium shell, whereas the other one is aluminum. Aluminum is a lot better at dissipating heat, so that's another reason too. Another pretty notable improvement too is with the GPU, the graphics processing unit. It's about 40% faster than before. So especially when it comes to things like obviously gaming, you'll notice a performance improvement, but even simple things like the operating system, like liquid glass, which is very, very graphics intense. You're also gonna notice an improvement with that. Even sometimes like on the 16 Pro, I would notice that it would sometimes be a little bit laggy with iOS 26, but now I don't really seem to have those same problems. If any of that's still kind of confusing, all you really need to know is that it's going to be a lot faster than before. Take, for example, just turning on the phone and booting it up for the first time. You can see it's a lot quicker compared to even the 16 Pro. Now, one of the biggest parts of the operating system now, obviously with everything being new, iOS 26. So a lot of the liquid glass animations are going to rely heavily on that brand new 40% improvement from the A19 Pro. But even still, it seems like doing all of that is a bit much just for some glass animations. So what's actually like the whole point of all these upgrades? So what's so special about liquid glass and iOS 26? Well, I feel like that's kind of what makes the phone. And I'll show you what I mean. iOS 26 is probably one of the biggest changes that came to the iPhone. It's, for one, a really big redesign with everything from liquid glass to the whole new naming of the operating system. One thing about the new operating systems though is that there are a lot of animations to make it what it is. Plus with things like the always on display and a whole bunch of other background features that are running, it's really going to eat into the battery life. As a matter of fact, as you can see, I'm actually down to 18% for my battery. But this also just goes to show you just how much resources the iOS 26 update is actually using. Now keep in mind, I am on a beta, it's 26.1, which as of today hasn't officially released, but even still, all of those like liquid glass animations, they really do eat at the battery. So if that is a concern for you, to be honest, I just recommend turning it off. But let's talk a little bit about iOS 26. Now, I feel like for a lot of people, it didn't really hit the mark, even back when it was first announced. And I can honestly say, I kind of understand where they're coming from. I mean, the main selling point isn't even finished. Now, it does bring a lot of cool things, like you can obviously change the colors of the home screen, and the new lock screen is also pretty cool. But like Apple Intelligence, a lot of features that were promised a year or two ago still haven't even made it into development yet, looks like. I mean, at least it's not in the beta. But a lot of it is kind of just like aesthetics. And so that leads me to believe that this isn't really the answer to the problem of Apple Intelligence. I think it's more so like the study guide, if that makes sense. And so part of the reason why I say that is because a bunch of new animations doesn't really justify 40% improvements in the GPU, a whole new redesign of the entire body, all of these other things that make the phone what it is and make it different from all the other phones. And so I think that this is kind of just teeing them up for the next step in whatever the future holds. And now I say all of this with a little bit of, well, actually not a little bit, a lot of optimism, because this is something that Apple kind of has to get right, especially if it wants to keep up with the competition. I mean, it's already kind of fumbled in the AI race, and so we'll see if this new chapter really is enough to keep Apple in the game. Now it's time to answer the question, is the 17 Pro actually worth upgrading to from something like the 16 Pro? Well, it depends. I know it's not the answer you're looking for, but like, I'll break it down this way. If you are looking for the absolute latest and greatest technology, especially when it comes to cameras in the Apple ecosystem, then yeah, it's a no-brainer. You're getting a better camera with better megapixel counts. So by that measure, yeah, it wins. And the battery life is also improved as well. Of course, if you want a new color, which Apple is not really known to put color in their products, then yeah, this is a no-brainer. But if you've already got something like the 16 Pro, then all of those things may or not be worth the upgrade for you. I think that this phone is really one of the first phones in a while from Apple that is like properly designed for pros. With the addition of Apple Log 2 and the vapor chamber and all these other things that make the phone a lot more pro, I think that is really who Apple is trying to make this phone for. Because again, I think that's really who Apple is trying to make this phone for. Because if you look at the 17, just the base model, it's got the exact same display as the 17 Pro. It has two of the exact same cameras as the 17 Pro. Even the front-facing camera is the same. So really all you're paying for is a different design and pro features. But realistically, most people just don't need to record in log or anything close to that, really. But if you're someone that shoots on a traditional camera, whether it's a mirrorless, DSLR, whatever it is, and you already shoot in log, then this is going to be a great addition to your kit because you can shoot in log. I mean, you can also do it with the 16 Pro, but the OpenGate recording gives you so much more flexibility. So hopefully this gave you some insight into what it's like living with the iPhone 17 Pro, at least for a day. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you next time.